go over Chapter 11 today, Scene Size Up. So, what's in the Scene Size Up? This is the very first thing that we do during our assessments. It's the very first thing that we should ever do for anything. And I'm going to start over. Alright guys, Chapter 11, EMT Scene Size Up. So we're going to go over Scene Size Up and what it means to do Scene Size Up. This is probably the very first thing that we ever should do in our assessment. So what goes into the Scene Size Up? So checking the scene safety, taking standard precautions, noting the mechanism of injury or the nature of the patient's illness, determining how many patients we have, and then deciding on what additional resources may be necessary. So the only predictable thing about emergencies is that they are often unpredictable and can pose many dangers. Which is true. There are very many things that happen from dispatch to getting on scene and it being a very different scene than what dispatch told us it was going to be. So let's talk about collision scenes. When you approach these scenes, we're going to look and listen for other emergency units approaching. Look for any kind of signs of collision-related power outage. So as you're coming up on the scene, are there buildings, lights, things that have power outage before you ever get to the scene? Because then that could mean that they either hit some type of pole or something else. Observe the traffic flow. How is it going? Is it going well? Is it stopped completely? Those are things that we want to also look at, and then look for any kind of smoke in the direction of the collision scene. It could tell you that something's on fire, something is not right. Just be aware, okay? So when we get within sight of the scene, we're going to still look for clues that indicate escaped hazardous materials like oil, gas, any kind of tanker, truck, flip, or turnover or something like that. Look for collision victims on or near the road. Some patients immediately want to get out of the vehicle as soon as they've been in a car accident. So we want to make sure that we assess everybody, make sure that we know who was there and who was on scene and who was involved in the accident. Okay, then look for smoke not seen at a distance. So continue to look for that. Continue to be aware, and then the broken utility poles and downed wires as well. So be alert for persons walking along the side of the road. So bystanders, fire, PD, tow truck drivers. I mean, they're all there. We can't all park right on top of the scene. So we're all gonna basically just kind of walk up to the scene. So we want to be sure that we're aware of our surroundings and that. Watch for signals for police officers. So they can also direct you where you need to park, because sometimes you're the last one there. So in an ambulance, so you're just gonna park wherever they pretty much tell you to park. So as you reach the scene, follow the instructions of the person in charge. Don your appropriate protective apparel, a helmet, bunker gear, and a vest. So where I work at Mercy, we do not have the vests or the bunker coats. Okay, we are provided a helmet and a vest, which should be used when you're on the scene of a car accident. So not every department has the bunker gear. So establishing a danger zone. So this is the the zone around the immediate wreckage of every vehicle collision. We don't necessarily have to worry about this because around here, fire and PD do this for us. But these are good things to know just in case you are the first ones on scene, or you're in charge. Okay, so when there are no apparent hazards, we're going to go 50 feet in all directions. You're going to just basically put a 50-foot radius around the scene. When fuel has been spilled, we're going to do 100 feet. When a vehicle's on fire, we're also going to do 100 feet. And then if there are wires down, we're going to do one full span of the wires away from the poles to which the broken wires are attached. Okay. And then if there's a hazardous material involved, it's a big old long process, but basically you have to, depending on the size and the amount, you may have to call a hazmat team. And again, we're not going to be calling for that around here. That's going to be more fire department stuff. So we're more focused on the patient and extricating the patient if we need to, and getting that patient to definitive care. Okay, so crime scenes and acts of violence. We're going to evaluate for the threat of violence. So how do we do that? So we make sure that we are aware of what can cause violence and what can be as a threat of violence. So fighting or loud noises, weapons visible or in use, signs of alcohol or other drug use, unusual silence, and knowledge of prior violence. When we talk about all these things, and you go into a scene, hopefully PD is there, and that they know about the violence beforehand, and they've cleared the scene, they've secured the scene, and they made it safe for us to go in. You know, it's just one of those things where you've got to, even though they've cleared it and they're on scene, they're making sure that the scene is safe, you still have to continually make yourself aware of your surroundings and keep your head on a swivel and be safe. So, although any call can present a potential safety hazard, what types of calls might pose the highest threats of potential violence? So, we talked about, at least one of them. Domestic abuse cases, pediatric cases, even deaths, sudden deaths can cause threats of potential violence. I had a call one time where we were out in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have PD on scene. We were pretty much us and fire, and it was a sudden, unexpected death. And I step out of the truck from, to talk to family, and they went off on each other, because half the family was there, and then the new family was there, and it was crazy. But they looked like they were about to be in a knockdown, drag out fight, and so you just have to be aware of those things, and that they can happen at any time. Okay, so standard precautions. We're always talking about BSI, body substance isolation. BSI should be one of the very first things. BSI and Scene Safe is the very first thing that should come out of your mouth when you are doing scenarios. If you don't do it for National Registry, then it's an automatic fail. So just be aware that, BSI, which includes gloves at minimum, mask, gown, goggles, whatever is needed for that call. And you've just got to have it. So always keep PPE available. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have an extra set of gloves in your pocket, pair of goggles in your pocket, something like that, just to have at all times. So the nature of the call. So this is why they called EMS. Okay. This is the reason that your patient has called EMS or a bystander has called EMS. So we're going to look at one of two things. It's either a mechanism of injury or a nature of illness. Their mechanism of injury is some type of trauma-related incident. So you're going to look at, was it a car accident? Was it a fall? Was it, something else? Those things are what you're going to look at, okay? And then nature of illness, that's where our medical scenario comes in, where you're looking at abdominal pain, chest pain, respiratory issue, a stroke, a seizure, diabetic issue. Any number of things can go into the nature of illness. Okay, so again, this is the mechanism of injury is what caused the injury. What are the forces that cause the injury? And then, understanding those forces, we can predict what kind of injury patterns or injuries that they may have. So when we look at various things in like motor vehicle accidents, we're looking at like, what kind of accidents was it? Was it a rollover? Was it a rear end? Was it a head-on? Was it a T-bone? We can pretty much kind of predict what kind of injuries they may have because of that accident. So in here, we're looking at some probably a rollover accident. The way that the top of the roof of the car is shaped upward, kind of looks like maybe it hit right here. This right here is damage from it either sliding against something or rolling on the pavement. The side view mirror is gone. This is, all messed up. It kind of maybe doesn't look like a rollover because of the semi back here. They may have just sideswiped it, but we don't know that for sure just based on this picture. But we do know that, there may be some injuries here to the driver. Minimal injuries probably if it was like a side swipe. And then this patient right here is probably the worst sided patient just because they were on that side if it was a side swipe. So head-on collisions, we've got the open up and over injury pattern and the down and under injury pattern. When you are looking at that, and give me just a second, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. So when we're looking at like the up and over injury patterns, that's up and over the steering wheel, the dashboard. Those are it's that type of injury pattern. And then the down and under injury patterns are the below the steering column, below the dashboard type injury patterns. Okay. So, deployed airbags may lead you to suspect certain types of injuries. If they were wearing a seatbelt, they may have some bruising along the seatbelt line. They may also have some internal bleeding because of a lacerated liver. So, looking at all of those things, whether or not they were wearing a seatbelt, did the airbags deploy? We can maybe guess that if the airbags did deploy, then they probably have some type of like contusion or blunt force trauma to the head, to the chest. They may even have burns because the powder that they pack this in these airbags in, because it releases at such a force, it has to be, it burns on the way out. Okay. So this damaged windshield would maybe lead you to suspect that they had the patient hit their head on the windshield, causing this spidering or starburst type injury. Okay. So think about think about the forces involved in a rear end collision. Um, the 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 main forces of a rear end collision would be that you get whiplash, okay, on the driver's side or the passenger, or really anybody in the vehicle could get whiplash. But if there's patients in the back of the vehicle and you have significant intrusion into the back of the vehicle, then you're looking at lots of injuries to the patients in the back of the vehicle. Side impact collisions, again, this depends on which side of the car is hit. If it's the driver's side, then the driver's side and the back passenger driver's side would have injuries, probably more significant than the other side. And then rollover collisions, all occupants in the vehicle are probably going to have some type of injury, as well as then you've got to look at what was loose in the vehicle and what could have caused injury to the patient inside the vehicle from it rolling over. So this rear end collision, you can see that the tire is not where it's supposed to be. So obviously there is significant intrusion into the back seat of this vehicle. So we want to make sure that we get these patients out and assess them really, really well, and take care of them as best we can. So this is that side impact. Again, we've got intrusion, significant intrusion into the vehicle on the driver's side. I mean, this does not look like a good scene. I would venture to say that this patient did not live just because of the amount of intrusion inside the vehicle. They've also got cribbing here. So this cribbing is used to stabilize the vehicle and make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, rollovers, again, we're looking at, you can see down here how much stuff was in that vehicle and how much of it can be a projectile inside that vehicle. So rotational impact collisions, these are cars that are struck and then spin. The initial impact often causes subsequent impacts. So, that car vehicle is going to spin, and it's going to hit a tree, it's going to hit a pole, could hit another vehicle. So, lots of impacts could be caused. So falls for a mechanism of injury. For an adult, it's anything more than 20 feet, and for a child, it's anything more than 10 feet or 2 to 3 times the child's height. Okay, those are significant falls. With this guy, just assessing the scene and seeing how he fell, where he fell from, could give you a lot of clues as to what kind of injuries he has. If he fell from where the plywood is right there that stops, instead of just going all the way up to the frame, then probably a significant fall, but it's probably 8 foot. And then you look at your other, where it's just a frame on top of that plywood. If he fell from way up there, yeah, we're probably looking at maybe 16, 20 feet. So yeah, it's probably a significant fall. Oops, sorry. All right. So important factors for falls. We want to know what the height was that the patient fell from. The surface that the patient fell onto, and part of the patient that hit the surface first, and anything that interrupted the fall. Were they able to land on something soft? Was there something that they hit on the way down? Those type of things. Okay. Penetrating trauma. This is injury caused by an object that passes through the skin or other body tissue. It's classified by the velocity of the item that caused the injury. When we look at penetrating trauma, you're looking at low velocity, which are knife injuries. The damage is limited to the area that was knifed, and there may be multiple wounds with repeated stabbing injuries. And then medium velocity would be our handgun, shotgun, and high velocity would be rifles. And these may be anywhere in the body. So there's two different types of injuries with this. There's the damage directly from the projectile, the bullet, that goes through the body, and then there's pressure-related damage or cavitation. And what happens is when the bullet goes through the body, it causes these pressure waves to expand outside of that normal bullet line. So it basically causes these little ripple effects that go out from the bullet direction. Causes these little cavities. Blunt force trauma, it's basically what it is when you get hit by something but it doesn't penetrate the skin. That's blunt force trauma. Okay. Signs are often subtle and easily overlooked, especially in the abdomen area. Bruising, redness, anything like that may raise suspicion and suggest some type of internal injury. And we always want to maintain a high index of suspicion based on the mechanism of injury. So, nature of illness. This is the reason, again, why the patient called EMS. We're going to begin by identifying the nature of the illness during the scene size up, and you must scan the entire scene. Okay, so actively look for additional patients. I don't know that this guy was probably like doing a marathon or some type of triathlon or something like that with his bike, because he really doesn't have the right shoes on and he's got pants on. So he's probably the only patient there, but just make sure that you're looking and you're seeing what else is going on. Okay. So information can be obtained from many sources, such as the patient, the family members, the bystanders, and the scene. Always look at your scene, see if there are empty pill bottles, empty alcohol bottles, various other things that can clue you into maybe what's going on with the patient. So number of patients and adequacy of resources. How many patients are present, and do we have enough resources to care for all of these patients? Okay, so this is more going into like the MCIs, the mass casualty incidents, the various other things that can present with multiple patients. Okay. The other thing that we need to think about is whether or not this situation requires some type of specialized resource. We almost always get fire departments on scene. And then a technical rescue, which would be like confined space, trench rescue, high angle, low angle, anything like that. Or do we need a hazmat team? Okay, so we're not necessarily calling for either of these things because fire has already been on scene and they are already looking at that and probably have already started those things. Okay. Alright, so chapter review. The scene size up is the first part of the patient assessment process. It's important during the scene size up to determine what if any threats there may be to our own safety and to the safety of others at the scene, and then take standard precautions. Next, it's important to determine the nature of the call by identifying the mechanism of injury or the nature of the patient's illness. And finally, you must take into account the number of patients and other factors at the scene to determine if you will need additional help. Okay, so always remember, determine if there are any threats to your safety or to the safety of others. If there are, then we're going to back out of that scene. We're going to make sure that we've got protection and that we can stay protected. Okay, use standard precautions, BSI. Utilize PD if needed. So determine the nature of the call by identifying the mechanism of injury or the patient's illness. Get our number of patients and if we need any additional resources. Okay, so these are just questions I want you to think about. There's no assignment or anything like that. Just think about these questions right now as I go through them. So for each of these dangers, what actions must be taken to remain safe at a collision scene? So what kind of safety precautions do you want to take at each of these scenes? So leaking gasoline, toxic or hazardous material spills, vehicle on fire, down power lines. Okay, what common mechanism of injury patterns for the following situations? Again, think about how these work. Think about what goes into these collisions and how they occur. Okay, so a head-on collision, rear-end collision, and a fall from a height. All right, so you are called to the scene of a shooting at a fast food restaurant. En route, you plan your scene size-up strategy. What actions do you anticipate taking on arrival? All right, so what actions do you think that you may need? So it's a shooting at a fast food restaurant. Scene safety is number one, okay? Making sure that our scene is safe. So hopefully PD is there before we get there. Otherwise, we'll have to stage. The next thing that we want to think about is how many people were shot. So if there's a multitude of people that have been shot, maybe we need to start setting up triage and calling in for additional ambulances. So we just want to make sure that we get all of that done and we take the best care that we can for our patients. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, any comments, let me know in the discussion below, and or you can email me, text me, call me, anything. I am available. Just let me know.